Hey everyone, welcome to the Net Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Deppen, and today I've got a special episode where I'm going to talk about some travel, some that I just recently completed, some that's coming up, and then I've got our first mailbag episode. So getting into the travel, just recently returned from Steamboat Springs for an event called DCX. So there's an entrepreneurship group I've been involved with for a couple years now called the DC, which kind of came out of a podcast called the Tropical MBA podcast. I think I started listening to that probably over 10 years ago. So the Tropical MBA podcast has always been a lot about being able to run location independent businesses. I think a lot of their thinking originally evolved out of the Tim Ferriss 4-Hour Work Week. In would that come out 2000, maybe 7, 8, something like that. But there's this entrepreneurship group that they kind of developed out of that. What I really like about it is it covers people around the world with location independent businesses. And what's great about it is to get into the group, you have to have a real business. So everybody in there is doing really cool stuff. So the kind of businesses they have are diverse. There's a lot of folks like me who are into real estate. There are people with software companies, crypto, all kinds of things all over the board. And it's super cheap too. It's like absurdly cheap. The main thing about getting in is just making sure that you're doing stuff. So they do events around the world periodically. They did one in Steamboat Springs, which was great. We had about, I think, 20, 25 people there all together, just a lot of fun, hanging out, people talking about their businesses, did a lot of skiing, skied pretty hard there, especially there was one day, I think we skied the whole day and took maybe like a 20-minute break to warm up. So that was pretty cool. But then some of the people, the ones spent the one day doing talks. So one guy gave a talk on his real estate, actually two people gave talks on their real estate businesses. One's a property manager that owns a bunch of rentals. The other just owns a bunch of rentals and travels all over the world. Had been spending a lot of time in Colombia and other places, has a really good property manager that he trusts, and it really frees him up to go out and do a lot of cool things. And then my friend Greg gave a talk about crypto. And if you want to learn more about his stuff, you can check out the BitLift podcast, which is really good. But Greg's been deep into crypto since about 2013 and can go into all kinds of nuances on all the crazy little avenues of crypto. I've dabbled in that a little bit myself, but it's been pretty much restricted to just buying some Bitcoin on Coinbase, although I don't know, he may have convinced me to buy some Luna, but I would have to figure out how to actually even do that. And then there was another guy there who was doing some consulting work for a private equity company. And then they asked them to be a turnaround CEO for one of their other companies. And what they're doing is really cool. It's basically healthcare records software for long-term care facilities. So real enterprise, big boy stuff, 100+ employees. So a lot of really neat stuff going on there. So what did I learn in the conference? I learned quite a bit. And one of the big things every time I hang out with these folks, because we also have kind of a core group in the Denver area that we get together once a month, about 7 or 8 of us. And, the big takeaway for me is to always think bigger. It's interesting when I talk to friends of mine who, aren't entrepreneurs at all, don't have any interest in doing other things. Sometimes I think, they get the impression that, some of what I do is kind of outlandish, having a W-2 job and then having this real estate portfolio and having training courses, but then hanging out with some of these folks who are doing stuff at like a really high level gets me thinking maybe I should be thinking a little bit bigger. The other one too is that's interesting is how much some of these folks travel. And I'm not going to travel to the degree they do because I got kids veteran in school, but it does make me think that I probably need to figure out how to better outsource so I'm not in the loop as much. I've done that to a pretty large degree, but I think there are a lot more things I could learn. And then I learned some really interesting travel tips. So some of these people had hung out in places like Medellin, Colombia, other places in South America and other parts of the world that can get pretty sketchy where you could get robbed. And I learned about the importance of, when you're in those places, carrying a decoy wallet and a decoy phone. And the idea is you just have a burner phone that may or may not even work, and a wallet with, let's just say like an old ID that's not valid, maybe an expired credit card, and like $5 in cash. So if you get robbed at gunpoint, you can give them this wallet and phone, but they don't get the real ones. Of course, the way I travel, like I'm pretty much never gonna, if I ever feel like that applies, I'm probably just never gonna go there. But if that's what you're into, that's an important travel tip. Okay, so then we got upcoming travel. So I might have mentioned this last time, but I'm going to be at the Papersource conference in Las Vegas. That's taking place from May 12th to May 14th. They were nice enough to give me a coupon code. So if you were going to go there, you can use the code Fusion. And I should have looked this up before I started recording. I think you save $50 with that. So if you just use the code Fusion, you can save a little bit of money. Fusion Notes is actually going to be a sponsor this year. So we're going to have a booth and be sponsoring the Saturday morning coffee, which that seemed like an appropriate one for me because I drink far too much coffee. So if you really hope you plan on coming out, I'd love to meet more of you folks face to face. This will be the first Note conference that I've been at since COVID. So I think I went to IMN February of 2020, right before COVID broke loose. And then I did not get to Distressed Mortgage Expo because I was in Steamboat that weekend. So really love to see you folks there. And if you do go to this conference or you go to other ones, I mean, the main thing is to get out there and meet people and talk to them. If you're brand new to the note space, now I should back up. I've never been to this conference before. I know the lineup of speakers they have is very good. So I'm sure there's like a lot of good stuff to learn in the sessions. But I think for me, I've gotten most of the value out of conferences just from networking and talking to people and meeting a lot of these people face to face that I've typically communicated with just over email or within Facebook groups and things like that. So definitely hope to see you there. And I'm looking forward to that. So then brings us to our mailbag. So I get a lot of emails from people. Sometimes like they're pretty short and sweet questions. The one I'm going to talk about today was a little longer and more involved. I really like getting these because they kind of make me think. And this one in particular had a lot going on in it. So I'll read through the email first, and then I'll kind of go through some of these different areas one by one. So here we go. So, hey, Dan, was just curious running this by you. I like real estate and real estate investment stuff like notes. However, a lot of normal people that went to college and work for a good company in my area make like 150 to 200K with a W-2 at around 45 years old and have about $1 million house and just invest in the stock market through retirement accounts. They don't do much more than that, but they still seem to do fine and probably make more money than a lot of people in real estate because they have an ongoing steady money coming in. What I'm seeing in reality is contrary to a lot of business books saying the middle class is dying or that you need to be in business because you can't make money as an employee. It seems in a lot of ways for most people, it's better just to have a job and that person can make more money doing that than being a full-time note investor. For myself, I'm doing well. I make quite an ordinary amount of money as an employee, but my expenses are low and I invest a lot of my money. But then I see some people with 400 to 800K W-2 jobs, and even with all the taxes they're paying, they're probably way overperforming my pace and can make me feel like maybe I'm not doing the right thing. But I don't know their lifestyle and how much pressure they have at work. If your job is so consuming, you don't have time to do side investing like buying rentals or notes, for example, and just go with the stock market, that may not be optimal. But if you have time to work on investments, you don't have as much money coming in as others, And then even if your investments are doing well, you could still be growing slower than others. Was curious your thoughts on this. So this was a really cool email that, has a lot going on in here, and, really got me to do a little bit of thinking. So I'll kind of go through some of the things in here one by one. So it talks about, the normal people in this area making good money with W-2s, and that 150 to 200K range. That's, I certainly know a lot of people in that range, but like that's up there, right? I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with just working a W-2 and putting money in the stock market. You certainly don't have to be in that 150 to 200K range. You can be way, way under that. And if you put like 10% of your money in, a Vanguard or Fidelity account and like an S&P 500 index fund, you're going to do totally fine. Like there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And it says, do those people do better than folks in real estate? That it's hard to say. I would say if you look at the folks who are doing real estate, whether it's part-time or full-time, there's a massive range of outcomes in that. So there are some people that are just animals that do large numbers of deals and love it and make just cruise ship loads full of money, or there are other people that just kind of dabble in it, maybe sometimes hit bad luck and don't do that well. So that's all over the place. I mean, the path of least resistance is definitely just to do the W-2 and plow money away in stocks. Like I said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that. I think some of this is personality based too. And it all just kind of depends on what you're interested in, right? And then he goes on to say about how, some people say the middle class is dying, and he's not really seeing that. I definitely agree with him on that. I think, the people who talk about the middle class, quote unquote, dying tend to be politicians who are trying to get your vote, right? So I've studied a lot of marketing. Like one marketing tactic is you kind of like invent a problem and then sell the solution, right? So sometimes I think politicians do that. They say, oh, well, there's this big problem in the middle class, and if you vote for me, I'll solve it. Or it could be talking head type folks, journalists trying to use fear porn to get clicks or get views. And yeah, sometimes it can be business books or people, selling things in real estate or other things within business, trying to suggest that you're not going to be okay as a W-2. And that's not true, right? The way I view it is I kind of like having the W-2 and the business. I've done the business full time for a while as well. I like the idea of having, the business or money in real estate because I feel like I have more control over my own destiny that way. If you have a W-2, that's definitely great. If you're highly specialized, then, there's some risk, right? Because careers last a very long time. If you say you're going to work from your early 20s into your 70s, which is probably not going to be that unlikely as life expectancies increase and other things, right? I mean, the world could change. Maybe that thing you specialized in is not as useful when you're older. And so you can burn down that risk by kind of diversifying your income streams and putting some of your money in real estate. But there's really no one size fits all answer to this. A lot of this kind of depends on you. All right. And then he talks about the people he sees making 400 to 800K W-2 jobs. That's really rarefied air. Like I've, known maybe a few number of like really high-end enterprise salespeople who just kill it doing that. And I've had like friends of friends working at investment banks where they work like 120 hours a week and stuff like that to do that. Certainly nothing wrong with doing that if you have the ability, but yeah, generally those like ultra high salaries tend to imply you're working a lot of hours, you're uber specialized. And so it's got to be something that you're really all in on. And I think that's really the more broad answer to this email, right? Like whether you're working a basic W-2, some kind of like ultra high achiever W-2 or, running a business or running real estate, either full-time or on the side. I mean, you got to figure out like really what floats your boat. What are you really interested in? Like, what do you really enjoy? Like, what are the things that you would do for free, right? So for me, if I look at a lot of the analysis I do in notes, like building calculators and building checklists and doing things like that, I mean, I do that stuff for free, probably, right? So even though it's a job, quote unquote, it doesn't really feel that way. And I think if you're doing something that you really dislike, then whether you're making a little bit of money or boatloads of money, you're probably not going to be very happy. And he goes on to say, yeah, if your job is so consuming, you don't have time to do side investing like buying rentals or notes, that could not be optimal. And that's true, right? Like if you've got that kind of W-2 job that requires insane hours, that might preclude you from doing investing on the time. For me personally, I kind of like my situation because I work 40 hours a week. I really like what I'm doing. That leaves me time to focus on real estate. I've got help with that as well. Yeah. So anyways, I thought that was a really good email. Those were, some of my thoughts on that. Yeah, I would definitely never try to provide a one size fits all answer for what people should do with their careers or with their spare time. It depends on your interests, your personality, and what you want to do. But the good thing is, right, there are all kinds of jobs you can go do these days where you're going to be just fine. I mean, the standard of living in 2022, even amongst like the poor, is pretty darn high. Like I've seen economists try to come up with metrics and show how like standards of living were better in the 1950s, and I'm just not buying that at all. If I went back to 1950s, I wouldn't have my iPhone. I wouldn't have my AirPods. I wouldn't have a car that drives as nice as what it does, no matter how much money I had to spend on a car. So anyways, I think these are the good old days when it comes down to it. So if you've got other questions or other things, you want to know about, or maybe you've got other things that are like more specific to the mechanics of notes, please drop me an email at dan@fusionnotes.com. I'd like to do more of these mailbags because I really enjoy getting those questions. So that's what I've got for you for now. I will see you next time. Thanks.